Yeah, I agree. You know what I think about? I'm thinking of the people that could be watching this. What if there's an author that feels like they only have one book in them? Like, are they saying, or I mean, what are we saying here? I'm playing
You know,
that, you know, if you have multiple books in you, then yeah, and I'm with you, like your mom, that you have to keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. If you're truly a writer and an author, I feel like you will keep at it because it's your calling, it's your love. You won't
yeah,
be like, I think definitely all authors get to a place where they get super frustrated, but you have to keep going. Absolutely. But I do want to I want to ask you two things. A, what about the one and done author?
mm-hmm.
And two, what do you think is realistic for someone to do? And specifically, I'm talking about an indie author, since that's probably the majority of people who are watching this. So what do you think? So realistic sales goals and one and done.
Sure. Let's see. So one and dones are, so again, so much of this conversation, whether it's a bestseller list or whether it's sales, is driven by sales. And the one and dones are the hardest to get sales for when contrasted with books in a series, where that's why publishers find it so attractive. If you're writing a 7-book series and they're, you know, good and marketable, it's because you might not get that much traction with book 1, but you get more traction with book 2, which sells more copies of book 1, more traction with book 3, sells more copies of books 1 and 2. Publishers have a strategy around buying books that are in the series, knowing that the bigger the next book in the series goes, the more sales from the previous books there will be as fans want to discover the rest of the series. The one and dones, I think, where that's most typically the case is a memoir, right? Somebody had an interesting life, interesting career. They have a compulsion that we all have. If you have that writer bone, you just can't help but write it. You want to tell your story. You work at it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, hours a day. You kind of get into your writing process and you finish your manuscript and you're ready to publish it. That is tricky, particularly if people don't actually know about your life. Like, you're kind of telling them about it for the first time. And through this book, but then my brother uses an example, who runs actually Pubvendo with me, that it's like buying a bottle of wine, whereas when you buy a bottle of wine, so many times if you haven't had it before, you're making a decision based on what the label looks like, or you don't really know what's inside the bottle, you're making a decision based on what's outside the bottle. But when you're buying a bottle of wine, you're making a $10 decision. Is this bottle worth $10 of my money? When you're buying a book, it's that plus, is this worth 10 hours of my time? So it's tricky. Again, if you don't have some brand differentiators, like you could say, like, I knew this president or this senator or or I am this business magnate, or I had this amazing experience growing up in the American South, or whatever it might have been, it's tricky to sort of differentiate. And you're putting all of your risk of your time and money into one book. But I would say for that, I wouldn't be discouraged, right? I would just keep working at it with realistic expectations. I would say from a sales perspective, so your number one sales audience is going to be your sphere of influence on day one. That's true whether you're indie or traditionally published. And this is why publishers value follower accounts on social media, is because they assume that some percentage of your followers will buy your book. That's just sphere of influence. And in my opinion, it's almost a little bit lazy of publishers to do that, because they're almost like making you do the work for them. But I also understand why they do that. Because it's a business. They're trying to guarantee, with as much certainty as they can, guarantee some level of sales. From there, it depends on your category, really. It depends how competitive. I would say if you are a novelist in any genre, or a genre-defying genre, perhaps, you have a lot more competition for people. I would say to maximize your sales, do as many giveaways as you can, because what you really need if you're writing a novel is somebody or some people to read the book and like it and tell their friends about it. Books have always been bought word of mouth, whether it's, I think I mentioned this already, whether it's your friend or Oprah or somebody in between. If somebody else says this is a good book, people are more likely to buy it. So the more people you can get to say that, particularly people who are influential, the better your chances are going to be. And it also depends on how much effort you put behind it. How much ad spend do you have available? Ad spend helps a lot, but now you're talking about having a lot of money to potentially lose, right? The best description I've ever heard about publishers is from a publisher in New York, who describes publishers as either investors or gamblers, depending upon how you look at them. Because the reality is nobody knows which books are going to do well and which ones aren't. And if you are the one and done author, you only have that one book to spread your risk to. So if it doesn't do well, all your time and money went into that one book and it didn't do well. Whereas if you were a publisher, you can spread that risk among thousands of titles, knowing that 70% of them are going to lose money, 20% of them will break even, and you need that 10% to break out and carry the list. If you're an editor, 10 books on your list that season, and you go 3 or 4 seasons in a row without getting a home run, you're going to lose your job. Everybody knows that some books don't do well and some books do, and it is very feast or famine. I would say as a realistic sales goal, this is, I think, where, again, getting to what do the actual numbers look like on Amazon, for example, of, of several 100,000 authors on KDP at the 50th percentile mark. They make less than $200 per year in sales. Make that your number one benchmark, because you want to beat that, right? If you can sell more than $200 per year in sales, you are already outselling half of the authors you're competing with on KDP. I would make a realistic sales goal as your debut, if you're indie, if it's a one and done, especially 1,000 units. Get to 1,000 units from your sphere of influence, your core target audience, who you can reach through digital, through advertising, through earned digital, through interviews. Shoe leather it, work hard at it, and try to get to 1,000 units. Once you get there, you have options. You have options to query agents. You have options to use that platform to go into bigger media opportunities. You have more people reading the book to socialize it with their friends and family. But I would make that your goal. If you are a one and done indie author who's writing fiction or memoir, get to 1,000 units, and by then you will probably have been #1 in your release or #1 bestseller in category on Amazon. And now you have a platform you have book buyers, you have fans, you have coverage, you have metrics you can report. Now you have options, and from there, it's kind of up to you.
Yeah. And do you mean $1,000 in a year?
I mean, I would say where Pubvendo does a lot of work is what's called mid-list. Mid-list being, it's not, David Baldacci or Michelle Obama, because those books don't need our help, frankly. Nor is it, the person who saw The Walking Dead and got inspired to write the best zombie apocalypse fan fiction on the planet. It's really in between. It's people who are usually professors or people who have careers that the book is kind of connected to that. If they're novels, and they're people who have usually, we don't often work with debut writers, though we certainly do and can on the circumstances. But I would say most of the books that we work on are projected to sell between 5,000 and 10,000 units in their first year. If your debut and you're indie, especially without bricks and mortar distribution, 1,000 unit sales in a year is an aggressive but attainable goal. But I also think a lot of indie authors who, again, it's not their fault that nobody's told them this. I think that they think that their book's going to sell 100,000 copies overnight. That is not the way that it works. There's too much competition from other books, from other authors, from Hulu, from Netflix. There's wallet share to consider. Especially, there's most American book buyers buy 3 to 4 books per year. And most of those 3 to 4 books per year that they buy are names that you would have heard of already. It's James Comey's Tell-All. It's David Baldacci's newest novel. It's whatever it might be. So you have to consider a lot of people need to take a chance on your unknown author brand and unknown book and really like it to get a snowball effect and get momentum around it. So anyway, I would target as an aggressive goal 1,000 units per year in your first year. And if you find that you're exceeding that, then you can obviously up your goal accordingly. And you're finding you're not quite hitting that, just think about how much time you have available to put into it and try to get into a habit of an hour a day, 3 to 5 days a week, and just stick to it. It's like going to the gym. You can't do it once and expect gains. You got to go every day. And if you stick with it for a few months, a year, it'll work.
Yeah, no. Josh, there's so much that we didn't talk about that we
Can we do this again?
Lunch and learn.
We
didn't even talk about the offering that we do with Pubvendo, which is this whole social media strategy behind book sales and the magic, I call it dark magic, that it does to drive book sales. So we'll just book another conversation about that, because that is really interesting, and I think pretty scary to authors, because they're like, oh my gosh, does that mean I have to post every day? And of course the teaser answer is, well, no, not if you hire, Girl Friday or Pubvendo or something like that. So this has been so great. I thank you for your time, and I will see you next time, because we have to do it again.
Always a pleasure, Georgie.
All right, see you later.
Bye.